But you're not gonna fix the part of the perimeter that got blown up? That wouldn't fly in Laterano.
Good afternoon, Doctor. I know that this is a bit different than my usual operator-focused reports, and I'm certainly less of an expert than Dr. Kaltzit. But I realize that there are a number of things I reference quite often in my reports that may not be common knowledge to you after your amnesia. Now, don't worry, my usual slow and operator-focused format will still continue. But I'd like to experiment with creating small, let's say primers, all related to a particular country, race, or theme. As a bonus, these primers give me an excuse to practice with BRTS's video editing software. I'd hate to mar an operator report with a failed experiment, after all. I've been learning a number of these skills from scratch, so please do let me know your thoughts on this format. There are no shortcuts to improvement, but feedback sure does come close. But let's move on. The first set of primers will be about Laterano, since my research is still handy after analyzing Spuria, Arturia, and sorting someone else where my research unfortunately hit some embarrassing snags.
Why are Silence and Saria arguing all the time? I don't get it.
As a baseline, empathy, sometimes called halo empathy, is the ability for Sancta to be able to sense the emotions of other nearby Sancta. It obviously serves as a powerful social glue between the angels, allowing easier communication and making it more likely that those in need of comfort will receive it. Of course, regular social skills can atrophy if empathy is relied on too much. The way this tends to manifest usually doesn't stop them from being incredibly charismatic and easy to have a good time with though, so it's rarely touched on just how difficult it is for other races to truly understand a traveling Sancta, even if they do like them quite a bit. Back to the mechanics of the ability, it is important to note that the emotions are complex things, so there are limits and variants to what empathy will reveal. As such, some complicated feelings can be misread, and deception, while difficult, is still possible. While this is a limitation, it does mean that Lateran-born Sancta do still have a natural reason to develop traditional social skills. Finally, empathy is always passively active. You can picture it as halos being radio towers for emotions. This constant exposure can occasionally cause stress for Sancta, who may try to cope by creating physical space, blasting music to distract themselves, or other such strategies. On the topic of distracting themselves, given that stealth is possible among Sancta, I'd imagine that one reason music can be effective is that consciously acknowledging the presence of another Sancta must at the very least affect the intensity of empathy. I wonder then, how distinct the emotions of others feel compared to one's own emotions? Which leads me to a bit of speculation, if you'll indulge me. There's a popular experiment that suggests physical cues, like our hearts beating too quickly, can cause the mind to subconsciously misinterpret, say, a heart beating due to fear as a heart beating due to romantic excitement, and this misinterpretation then affects a person's conscious thoughts. Could being swarmed in the emotions of a crowd due to halo empathy cause similar misfires in the Sancting mind? For now I can only speculate, but I'd be curious to hear your take, Doctor. And for more context, see the primer Alienus, Errari, and Sancting Illnesses for information on cases where empathy functions unexpectedly.
Being treated as an aberration is normal to me, because I cannot understand other people, nor do I have any desire to deal with them. On the contrary, talking to you is quite interesting to me, Doctor. Neither you nor the notarial hall has denied me because of the way I live. You make me feel at ease. Thank you.
As a rule of thumb, every trait, feeling, or behavior we have exists on a spectrum. Extreme or rare cases that cause suffering are then labeled illnesses. Errari roughly translates to lost or astray, and is used to describe an empathic illness often diagnosed in Sancta who are away from Laterano. Keep this translation, astray, in mind. It'll come up later. Now, Errari is described as having halo empathy, but being unable to understand the meaning behind the feelings they sense, which causes the Sancta stress. They sense happiness, but not the reason for it, grief, but not the cause. In official Lateran texts, it's spoken of like a rare physiological disorder, as though the failure to understand others despite empathy is attributable to a misfiring of neurons. I've come to doubt this implication. As a case study, we see the described symptoms in Fortuna and Delfina from the Hortes de Escapismo incident. See my report on Spuria for more details on that incident, so you can come to your own conclusions. But I believe the events leading up to the Errari seem more in line with an extreme form of culture shock. Despite its limitations, many Sancta are used to halo empathy as being enough to achieve at least basic understanding between each other. Experiencing a situation where it fails so spectacularly must be existentially disorienting. Now, to contrast this with a class of illness that I believe is likely due to a different, let's say, wiring in the brain. Alienness is an old and impolite term that translates roughly to madness. Cases are rare, so symptoms are hard to codify, but Truya, a woman giving the label by Pope Evangelista himself, may serve as a useful case study. And here I'll remind you how difficult and arguably subjective it can be to diagnose mental illness. It's my opinion that Federico would have been given the same label if his emotion blindness were not checked by a strict adherence to rules and regulations. The broad strokes I can tell you about alienness are that it seems to be a catch-all label for those that display not only deviant behavior, but an inherently deviant way of thinking that Laterano can neither accept nor comprehend. But, interestingly, this has little or no impact with their connection to the capital L law, and Evangelista even made an off-the-record remark that perhaps the alienists are considered by the law to be necessary, having their own unique role to play that Latin society has failed to see up to now. Personally, I just find the term to be altogether too vague to be useful. I think the label says more about Lateran culture as a whole and the expectations Laterano has of its citizens than it does about the individuals giving the label. Moving on, there are also disabilities that I believe are truly unique to the Sancta, which write a strange balance between physical and mental impairment. Perhaps an example would help unpack that. Some Sancta, like Arnachial, are born with seemingly physical conditions that not only deform their halos and wings, but also impact the innate gifts of a Sancta. In his case, Arnachial has difficulty accessing the same innate talent with a firearm that his cohorts enjoy. While it would require some testing to confirm, he at least suggests that his condition is a significant factor in failing his licensing exam. Another condition unique to the Sancta, falling, has a lot to unpack, so it'll have its own primer. And of course, oropathy can have all manner of unique effects on the Sancta that we are still studying. In all these cases, the actual impact on the Sancta varies. Some are even incredibly high functioning, and no condition removes a person's ability to have a dignified and fulfilling life. So I'll repeat. Every trait, feeling, or behavior we have exists on a spectrum. It is when these deviations cause suffering that we tend to use the label illness.
Not every Laterano has the right to use guns, rare weapons that they are. In my hometown, we're pretty good at making knockoff gun parts. The crossbow crafting industry is also on the rise.
There are many weapons that are given the colloquial title of gun. However, today we'll just talk about the classic ideal, Laterano's patron firearms. While their killing power isn't innately high, they do become incredibly powerful for those who excel in their use, counterbalanced by the fact that firing a firearm requires complex, specialized, and rapid arts casting. This major barrier is one that Sancta, in general, are instinctively capable of crossing, barring a birth defect, such as Arnachial's, or a fall from grace, such as Mostima's. Given this ability, and Laterano's near monopoly on gun technology, a monopoly that they try to tightly control, they have become a symbol of Lateran culture, and practically every Sancta citizen carries one. I say practically because there are Lateran towns with a growing industry of faux gun parts and crossbows, due to a lack of access. And a few Sancta, like our own Iron Hammer in Workshop 3, or Operator Arene, simply prefer other tools. Furthermore, Laterano's monopoly has begun to slip in recent years, with companies like Raytheon working on mass production, and innovators like Sesa developing guns that can be used to near full potential, with little or no aptitude for arts. As developments continue, the concept of gun becomes blurrier, especially with gun-like casting implements, specialized crossbows, and grenade launchers being mistaken for the same type of weapon as the Laterano firearm. They have visual similarities, but require significantly different techniques to build, activate, and fight with.
Laterano code says whoever breaks it pays for it, but reasonable loss of property emissions can be expensed. You order my actions, thus compensation fees naturally land with you too.
With how, let's just say, laid back the Sancta are, many people jokingly consider Laterano to be a lawless city of angels. However, Laterano's legal system is comparable to most nations with a well-established bureaucracy, and some incredibly forward-thinking policies to boot. Some countries, such as Iberia and Siracusa, even take cultural inspiration from Laterano. So let's go into what kinds of laws exist in Laterano. No, don't worry, I'm not going to read out a bill or anything to you. I'll just go over some facts that'll give you an idea of the general philosophies that the laws are based on. Laterano has a constitution that famously grants 13 inviolable rights to all its citizens, sancta, liberi, or otherwise. And, while Laterans are famous for chaotic acts, such as letting loose the explosions in their own streets, they still only do so after filing the appropriate documents with the notarial hall. Laterano's active bureaucracy even extends past its borders, with not only diplomats traveling to aid or deal with foreign powers, but specialized agents trained to oversee Laterano citizens that just so happen to not live in Laterano. Laterano believes its responsibility to its citizens, and its citizens' obligations to Laterano remain intact wherever they are on Terra. For example, an international sancta still owes taxes, and the Lateran executor will cross borders to find and realize a citizen's last will and testament if possible. Of course, none of that is as significant as the capital L law, which is treated as the divine and self-evident core of Lateran society. Halo empathy, the commandments, the divine weight behind the Pope's words, all draw from the divine law. What is the divine law? What makes it worthy of faith? Careful, Dokutah? Questioning that can lead to some dangerous paths. And the answer doesn't change the day-to-day too much, regardless, so it crosses the scope of this primer. And besides, just like Ambriel, how would I know about the secret of Laterano?
Doctor, this is my medical examination report. Please confirm. Currently, no horns have grown on my head, and my halo has seen no changes in shape or form. Indeed, my violation of the law has not had a physical effect on me, but it's nothing worthy of celebration. Abnormalities have been on the rise. This is an omen of disaster.
Halo empathy, an innate ability to use guns, and a connection to Laterano's law. While I will never condone those who use race as a source of discrimination, and acknowledge there are those who invent further division where none exists, it cannot be denied that the races of Terra have notable physiological differences, and sancta are sometimes considered particularly blessed. On the surface, their notable genetic drawbacks are a difficulty with stealth missions due to their glowing wings, the need to overcome the discomfort of wearing hats due to their halos, and the fact that mixed-race couplings will never produce another sancta. Well, outside of a single, incredibly recent case between a sancta mother and a sarkas father. That's a story for another time that goes beyond the mere primer, though. Back to the point. Unlike the innate strengths of other races, sancta are unique in their ability to lose these benefits, due to nothing more than the choices they make. There are commandments by which sancta must live, inscribed in their hearts by the law. The most well-known is that sancta must never fire their patron firearms at each other. Upon breaking these commandments, a sancta will fall. This is a process that not only strips a sancta of their innate gifts, but even physically changes them to resemble the sarkas. This is for reasons that we don't really have time to get into right now. Just know that it has to do with the history of the sancta. If you'll forgive some speculation on my part, I also believe that it's likely the falling is a spectrum, and barring extreme cases, such as firing on and killing another sancta, I've seen evidence that it may be reversible if dealt with before reaching a critical threshold. Legal repercussions for falling also vary on the case, but as a general rule, falling sancta are kept out of the public eye. Interestingly, these commandments are far more vague than the title implies. Commandments are up to interpretation, though not by a mortal system or judge, but by the divine law itself. To fall is to be rejected by the law, and its sense of morality is rather alien, to say the least. Through case studies, the best I can say is that it seems to take the individual's beliefs into account, perhaps giving leniency to those who act with true conviction that they act on behalf of Laterano's greater good. If you'd like a deeper dive, we'll have an opportunity when we get around to discussing Mostima, her fall, and Anduang, the sancta she shot.
I grew up in Laterano and didn't really have the chance to learn about other cultures. Here at Rhodes Island, I get to see such diversity, way beyond my imagination. Actually, it's not so bad.